How's it going, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Armchair Analysis here on a wonderful Thursday. Now, the weather isn't all that great, at least not here in the Carolinas, but it's been a good Thursday. 90 plus degrees, man. It's summer's right here. I mean, we're just under 2 weeks away from it, but preview season, we're a week in now. And today, it's all about the South Carolina Gamecocks, and I gotta tell you, I'm excited to do this one. This is a team I know very well. Those of you who do know, I've been to at least one game at Williams-Brice over the last 4 years now. Have had a great time. Have enjoyed every bit of it, and but it's a team that I know. It's one of the few that I know better than maybe most, and so I'm excited to get into this. I'm excited to probably have one of the best previews we've had so far. It's a good time for it, but we've got plenty more beyond that as well. So make sure you guys stick around. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe, comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of everything. South Carolina fans, just because I do know this team, still, let me know if there's something I might miss, something I may not be completely in tune on. Remember, covering 138 teams, that there's bound to be a miss somewhere. But I'm excited for it, and I thank you all for tuning in. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into this video. And it's going to start by talking about what this team was last year. And this was a disappointing team. Mike Shula, it didn't work out. I mean, it wasn't even close to working out. And really, it was just, it never had a chance to work out. This team was not capable of playing the style of football that he wanted to play. The personnel matchups and groupings were not good offensively. And the offensive line was just terrible. Plain and simple, they were awful. A lot of these things changed when Kendall Briles was hired and announced as the new offensive coordinator. They go out and make a huge splash in the portal, specifically on the offensive line, and it came from Jacarius Peak, coming over from NC State, one of the best linemen to enter the portal. Decides to take his talents just down the road to Columbia, South Carolina, and that's a big deal for this South Carolina program. I think that's a really big addition to this O-line. As I already said, he's going to play left tackle. That's a big deal. They went out and made some other moves as well on the offensive line, including Emmanuel Kojo Poku, who comes over from, again, East Carolina, going to be a big part of this offensive line as well. Should play right guard. They went out and addressed this offensive line. 5 brand new starters to this team, but I think they're going to fit into the system very well. Talk about guys that'll fit into the system. Look no further than Nitro Tuggle, who comes over from Purdue, who has an opportunity to be a playmaker from the very beginning and a huge asset to this offense that already has plenty of playmakers on it. And we'll talk more about that as well. This was an an off season of building, trying to put something together to save a job for Shane Beamer. It's no secret he is on the hot seat going into this year, and rightfully so. South Carolina didn't have the ability to go into this to try to jump into the carousel last year and try to snag a big hire because, well, really they would have been the bottom of the food chain there. They had to go about this the right way. And again, Mike Shula, not Don Shula, Mike Shula, it just didn't cut it. Things were not great there. I can remember going to the Oklahoma game last year, which is the game I attended last year, and it wasn't great. I mean, look, the play calling was just there was no method, there was no intent behind anything that seemed to be done. The offensive line again couldn't do anything, and it kind of just left Lenore Sellers to kind of have to figure it out on his own. It just didn't work out. It was a very rough time last year with this offense. So I think that that's already a big step forward and a step that I think a lot of people are excited to see taken. When you look elsewhere at some of the other moves that were made, it really came down to filling some of the gaps, right? This team could not run the ball, hence the offensive line problems. Address that. They also go out and get Christian Clark, who was not even a top 3 running back at Texas, but still put up a decent amount of yards. I think he develops into a good thing. But here's the thing about South Carolina and specifically this run game. Stan Drayton takes over as the running backs coach, and I think that's one of the more underrated moves this entire staff had over the offseason was Stan Drayton coming over. You know him as a former head coach at Temple, but you also know him as a national championship winning assistant. Florida in 2006 and Ohio State in 2014. He's got that pedigree, and he knows what he's doing with the running back rooms. That's one thing that you could say about his teams, especially at Temple. They knew how to figure out how to run the ball and be a physical team. They were never great, and they were certainly not the most talented. But they did figure those things out. I'm excited to watch where things go with this new look offense. I mean, I can't say it enough. When you look at this team, it's not only just that, it's not just a new look offense. There's a lot of returning production here. This is a 5th ranked team in returning production. 68% of production from last year comes back. It's led by the quarterback, Lenore Sellers. It's led by guys like Nick Harbor. It's led on the defense by guys like J.R. Johnson, Dylan Stewart, Justin Okoronkwo, who was fantastic last year, and even Vakari Swain, who came out of nowhere and became a reliable playmaker in the secondary. Clayton White's back as defensive coordinator. This team's got a lot of things to be excited about going into this year, and a schedule that opens up a lot of room to be excited. You look at the roster breakdown, this is a team that is, honestly, I don't want to say young, but balanced. 23 seniors, 22 juniors, 26 sophomores, and 31 freshmen. It's a young team, but it is an experienced team, and I think that's going to take these guys a lot further than that 4-8 season last year, again, with a lot of changes put around this team. You go and look at last year's stats. We talked about 4-8, 1-7 in SEC play. 14th overall recruiting class with 19 commitments brought in, and 19th ranked portal class with 25 portal commits brought in. Some of those names will include, again, I mentioned Christian Clark, but they also brought in a couple other players in the running back room. Sam Dixon from Ohio State, Jabri Coleman from Penn State. Those two guys, we'll see where they kind of slot in. The entirety of this offensive line is different. Starts with Nitro Tuggle in the wide receiver room. Jaden Gibson from Oklahoma is a guy that I think is going to play a considerable amount as well. You look at the defensive side of the ball, it was the defensive line. That was the biggest focus that South Carolina had overall. They wanted to kind of replenish what they lost, and keeping Dylan Stewart was a big part of it. But you lose Desmond Umeozulu. He goes over to Alabama. You had to kind of replace some of that production. I think they did a great job of this. Okay. Tomiwa Drojai from Illinois. Caleb Herring from Tennessee, who I think is going to be the guy that pairs on the opposite side of Dylan Stewart for the majority of snaps. But you're also going to see Kelby Collins, Jordan Thomas, Drew Collins. There's a few guys who are going to jump into that fold, and there's some players that returned from last year who are certainly not out of the question to be starters or at least significant role players on this defense. And then the DB room, that's the only other place they made any changes. Quaysheed Scott comes over from Kentucky and was an impressive player last year for Kentucky. How will he fill in? He's looking to be kind of the slot corner this year, I think, is the position that he's going to take over. I think they've got a really good group. And then, of course, they brought in Upton Belenfant, the kicker from Texas Tech. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into our graphics here, the stats from 2025. This defense was actually very, very solid. I don't want to say great. I don't want to say good. I think they were solid. There was some room to improve, certainly, in another year will help that out a lot. 22.1 points per game allowed. That was 47th in college football. 45th in college football. 353 yards per game allowed. That was 53rd. 59th in pass yards per game allowed, and 49th in rush yards per game allowed. This was a solid defense. Biggest issues came into games where they just could not stay on the field offensively and gave their defense not a whole lot to really work with. You look at the offensive side of the ball, and it was just, I would say, okay at best. I mean, the past game was okay, but they trailed the majority of the season. It was a no-brainer. They had to throw the ball a good amount. But I think that the personnel was mismanaged. That's my take on this whole thing. I think the personnel was mismanaged terribly. You look at this team, they were able to throw the ball decently, 67th in the country, but again, they played from behind. The rush yardage was awful. They couldn't block, couldn't dial up any decent run plays whatsoever. And then 336 yards per game overall. So where does this team get better? How does this team get better? Especially when they didn't have a whole lot of turnover in the roster and potential starters. Well, we'll talk about it. Look at the roster and projected starters here in the 2026 offense. Again, it starts with Lenore Sellers. Last year, 2,400 yards passing, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. They just didn't have the downfield passing game to figure it out. they really didn't have any kind of passing game to figure it out. And surprisingly, again, the numbers just look a little inflated in the past game simply because they played from behind for so much of their games. Lenore Sellers takes a step forward this year simply because he's got I think, better coaching around him, and specifically a better coordinator around him. Kendall Briles knows how to draw some things up. They go back to passing the ball around the yard a little bit more, kind of think closer to what he was under Dwell Logans versus what he was last year under Mike Shula. That's kind of the difference that you'll see here. And I think the experience will take him even a step further. As long as he can regain the confidence, Lenore Sellers is going to be fine. When you look at backups, it's going to be Cutter Woods, redshirt freshman from last year, is going to be a guy to watch for as the backup. You could also see the transfer Lucian Anderson come over from Bowling Green, see where he fills in. Landon Duckworth, I expect a redshirt this year. Don't expect to see him on the field too terribly much. You will see him at some point, especially in some of the blowout games. But you won't see a ton of Landon Duckworth this year. But that is a name to keep in mind because I think he's the future of the program at quarterback. At running back, it's Matt Fuller, Christian Clark, Isaiah Augustave, and then, again, any combination of the other running backs already mentioned today. You could see probably Kendall Briles said 4 to 5 deep, maybe even 6 deep. I don't know if that's fully there, but I think Matt Fuller and Christian Clark are going to be your 1 and 2 backs for certain. You look at the wide receiver room, it's Nitro Tuggle, going to be wide receiver 1, but Nick Harbor took a big step forward last year in his first full offseason of football-only training. Year 2, fully focused on college football, fully focused on the wide receiver position specifically. The route running should continue to improve. The hands should continue to improve. They were already very good last year, and he had a lot of solid plays, especially down the stretch of the season. Expect Nick Harbor to be kind of a breakout player this year, and more of a breakout than just, oh, he's fast, so therefore he's going to be a breakout. Like, expect him to be. He was a 600-yard receiver last year. I think he'll probably add 200 to that, maybe even 300. He might approach the 1,000-yard mark. At wide receiver 3, it's Mazeo Bennett. This is a guy that I think did not get used enough last year, and it shows by 62 receiving yards. Was not utilized enough last year. He is a fantastic slot receiver, deserves to be in that position, deserves to be on the field. I will say Donovan Murph, the sophomore, is going to be a guy that fills into that role as well. And when you want to talk about going 5 deep at wide receiver, Jaden Sellers, younger brother of Lenoris, was also really solid last year. There are 5 good options that I think Kendall Briles will be able to scheme open. Let's talk about the 6th option. That's the tight end Brady Hunt. Brady Hunt comes back, 168 receiving yards last year. Not utilized quite the way that Carolina's been able to use the tight ends, especially when you go back to that Dwell Logans era. Brady Hunt's going to be a big part of this thing. I would expect to see him probably approach the 200, maybe 250 receiving yards mark. I don't think he'll be a huge impact player, but you could see him start to kind of take some steps forward and be a significant role player in this offense. The offensive line, again, is going to be led by Jacarius Peak, and I'm just excited to watch what he's able to do when it comes to being able to lead this offensive line, being able to kind of, I don't want to say teach the game a little bit, but teach the game a little bit. He's one of the better pass protectors in college football, and especially here in the SEC, he's going to be really solid. He's got some guys that have a good amount of experience. I mean, every one of these projected starters are seniors or junior or above, with Hank Purvis being the junior. But they're all experienced guys. 850 snaps for Jacarius Peak, 496 for Hank Purvis last year, 593 for Carter Miller, 977 for Poku. And then Dane Arnett's the only one that didn't have any stats, didn't accrue any stats. You know, and if it's not him, you could see a world where I am going to butcher this badly, and I am sorry. Ebubadike Nabugwu. Maybe not that bad. Okay. But that's who you can expect to be maybe a guy that would fill in on that right tackle side of things. I'm not terribly certain. That's the one. It's just the one place I'm just not fully there yet on being comfortable. Armando Nieves is a tackle that can certainly fill into this lineup as well. Came up from Mexico State. was decent last year, was certainly nothing to write home about, but can be a guy that has experience that can fill in. Just gonna depend on the strength and conditioning. Gonna depend on whether or not Kendall Browse can scheme it up a little bit. Overall, my eyes are on this running back room. It has to be a better run game than it was last year. When Lenore Sellers is your second leading rusher, which he should have been, I mean, he's going to get the ball a considerable amount. But in saying that, he shouldn't be everything in the offense. And this offense just could not figure out how to run the ball last year. They couldn't create holes. They couldn't seem to work as a unit on the offensive line. And the running backs just weren't all that great. Matt Fuller was probably the best one on the roster at times. As a matter of fact, he was the leading rusher last year. But there's just room to improve significantly for this team, and we'll just have to kind of see where that goes. But I think the running back room will be better. I think the run game will be better. And overall, I think this offense takes a significant step forward. I mean, 104th in points per game, 109th in yards per game, I would expect to probably jump into the top 60 at the minimum. And I think that's probably being conservative. I think this is going to be a much improved offense. Taking a shift to the defense, they were good last year, and the majority of this defense comes back. I mean, like I said, you lose Desmond Umeozulu, but beyond that, Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy is back. He was the star defensive tackle last year. He's going to be a big part of this thing going forward. You can obviously expect big things from Dylan Stewart. He's been propped up for 3 years now. Caleb Herring comes over from Tennessee, and while he didn't do anything crazy in terms of being a big-time playmaker in terms of tackles, only 14 last year, 6 of those were for loss and 4 sacks. I just feel like he's going to step in and be that guy. Now, Drew Collins, the Arkansas State transfer, was decent last year, 6 tackles in his limited experience, but 3 for loss and 3 sacks. However that combination is going to work out, and let's not forget Anthony Addison, who's a redshirt freshman. They're very excited about what he can bring to the table on the other side. I feel like it's Dylan Stewart and then whoever else. I'm going Caleb Herring for right now. That's kind of where I feel like things will lead. At defensive tackle, it's going to be Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy. That's the one we know for sure. I've seen Troy Pikes as a certain possibility, given that he has experience and he's been in this system. But I'm looking at Tomiwa Duroje. I just expect him to be a guy that steps forward and can lead on that line of scrimmage. 15 tackles last year, 4.5 for loss, 2 sacks, was just a solid player for Illinois last year coming off the bench. Expect him to be a guy that can maybe play a considerable amount as well throughout the course of the year. I think this defensive line is deeper than people are going to give it credit for. The stats aren't there, but the talent overall is there. And I think that's where people are going to get a little bit tripped up about this team on the front. When you look just that next level back, the linebacker position, this might be one of the better linebacker groups in the SEC. Justin Okoronkwo was honestly a surprisingly good player last year. 64 tackles, 4 for loss, and an interception. Fred or J.R. Johnson comes back, 61 tackles, 3 for loss, 1 sack, and an interception. Those 2 guys, I think, are just going to be a very big part of this defense, and I'm sure it's going to be J.R. Johnson once again on the green dot. I feel like he's going to be able to take that step forward even further and be another kind of defensive player of the year type of candidate. This linebacker room is going to be really good. And I think this front 7 is going to be very good, which is going to help on the back end. And the back end loses a good amount. I mean, there was some talent here last year. Brandon Cisse goes in the first round of the NFL draft just in April. And, you look at this group, Vakari Swain comes into his junior season and looks to make a bigger impact than he already has. Judge Collier is the most experienced one in the room and certainly has potential to be that kind of a player for them. The biggest thing he hasn't done yet this point in his career has just been a solid hands guy. That's why you play defense, as some may say. But I think Judge Collier can take a further step forward in this defense. Quaysheed Scott's going to come over and I think be a really solid addition in the nickel. And then you go beyond that. Gerald Kilgore played considerably last year, had 2 interceptions himself. DeMarcus Leach, they're excited about. Koski Barnes is going to be able to play a little bit more this year. And then you go even in the safeties room, and it's David Busey and Peyton Williams. And Peyton Williams comes back after what was an impressive year in his own right. 2 interceptions, 50 tackles, 1 for loss, and 1 sack. This is a decent secondary. It's kind of what you expect from South Carolina's secondaries over the last couple of years. I think that it kind of just carries where it left off. And this defense has potential. We talked about the offense taking a step forward. Maybe the defense jumps into the top 40. And what if the offense jumps all the way up into the top 40? I mean, we could be talking about a team that takes a significant step forward this season. And I don't know that anybody would be overly surprised about it. Now, there's certainly a lot to question about that, and it certainly comes from the schedule. There's a lot of tricky games and certainly tricky predictions in this schedule. There's a lot to like of the South Carolina team, and I think there's a reason to be positive if you're in Columbia and looking forward to what this year could bring. Let's take a look at that schedule. Look, the win total sits at 6.5, and you look at this schedule, and you might struggle on the front end trying to figure out where you find 6.5. SEC championship odds are plus 5,500, which look good, but they're actually 11th in SEC odds. National championship odds were much higher than I thought they would be, plus 12,500. Best natty odds of any team we've previewed so far. So that's a good start. You look at this schedule, and the non-con is certainly, it leaves something to be desired. Kent State and Towson to start the season, then at Clemson is, it just depends on how Christopher Vezina comes together and really how this Clemson offense comes together. I'm not overly sold on them at any rate either, and I know we've got a ways to go for that preview comes around. As a matter of fact, Clemson fans, if you're watching this out of spite, just know that your team preview is coming down the line on July 3rd. So if you're intrigued about what I have to say, July 3rd is your day. You look at this SEC schedule, Mississippi State got better last year. I think they could be a possibly dangerous team, but I'm not expecting too terribly much. We haven't yet previewed Mississippi State. Alabama on the road is going to be interesting because of how young this team is, especially at the quarterback position. Whoever starts is going to be kind of in one of their first real big opportunities. Kentucky under Will Stein, I really like what Kentucky put together. I just don't know how good they might be by October. Florida on the road, it just depends on how quick Buster Faulkner can put it together and really how the starting quarterback comes together, whether it's whether Philo ends up getting the job or whether somebody else, Tramel Jones maybe, in that room gets the job. A bye week before Tennessee certainly opens some things up for excitement in that game. Oklahoma on the road is going to be tough. John Mateer's back, and honestly, Oklahoma dominated the South Carolina team last year with an injured John Mateer. Texas A&M, that game is always wacky in Columbia. This game over the 2020s decade has been wacky almost every single year they've played. I expect nothing less this year. We'll talk a little more about that. Arkansas might be your easiest game, but you get them on the road, and then you close out with Georgia and Clemson before the end of the year. It's going to be a difficult schedule. It's going to be an interesting year, and it's going to come down to how much they're willing to fight. This team plays hard for Shane Beamer. This team is probably going to play hard for Kendall Briles offensively. And Clayton White has done a good job of just keeping this defense in the conversation year in and year out. They've done a really solid job on that side of the ball. So let's talk about the prediction. It's going to start, and I'm not even going to waste time. 2-0. 2-0. Kent State, I like Matt Carney, but I don't think they're even hanging in this game. And then Towson, for sure not. A home game against Mississippi State, I think they'll be the better team in this one. I just expect some big things. This is a SEC opener. You want to get off to the right start. I think they will. It'll be a win. 3-0 for South Carolina. On the road against Alabama, whether it's Keelan Russell, Austin Mack, I don't really care who the quarterback is. There's a lot of things about this Alabama team I like, and I like where they're headed. Kane Womack has done a great job as a defensive coordinator, and for all the crap he got the first year over there, he's really got things figured out. This offense is going to come together at some point in the year. I just don't know when. I don't know when specifically the quarterback position we can feel comfortable about. If this game was in Columbia, I'm pulling South Carolina for the upset. But I think this game being at Alabama, Alabama being the favorites, the first real opportunity for Keelan Russell to potentially show what he's got. I think we got to go ahead and take Alabama to get the win at home. So then they come back out of that game, Kentucky in Columbia at Williams-Brice Stadium. I think that's going to be a chance for them to get the job done, win that game. Taking the experience of this offense and specifically Lenora Sellers over Kenny Minchie. That's going to be the difference maker in this game. But I'm telling you, I'm concerned if I'm anybody playing Kentucky this year because they could be maybe the surprise team of the conference. You go on the road to Florida. I'm just not fully bought into the quarterback position. I think it'll be Tramel Jones is kind of where I'm leaning right now. If I were to pick a starter right now, I'll tell you that's who I think will be the starter on October 10th. I'm going Tramel Jones. I think his legs will create a bigger opportunity. Whoever the quarterback is, I just don't know that I buy fully into them being able to get the job done against this defense. I think this defense is going to create some looks that will confuse some things, make things look a little more difficult. That'll be the opportunity for South Carolina to get the win. They will start 5-1 going into the bye week. You come out of the bye week against Tennessee, and I just think it'll be the better offense. And that's really the difference maker here. I talked about Tramel Jones being a little confused. I even talked about Keelan Russell and or Austin Mack being a little confused. Faison Brandon is projected to be the starter. And at this point in Tennessee's season, I am going to double check myself here because I certainly don't want to be completely off. And forgive me because I didn't. Again, sometimes I do things I just go a little off script, and I'm sorry for that. That might be a little frustrating for some. I understand. But every once in a while, I get this little reason to think, and yeah, here it is. So the toughest game on the road for Tennessee to this point will have been a trip to Bobby Dodd Stadium. And with all due respect to Bobby Dodd Stadium, it is not an SEC environment, and it is not Williams-Brice Stadium. Being there, knowing what it can create for some teams, I just don't know that a freshman quarterback, if that's who it is, and to be honest, if it's George McIntyre, I'm all in on South Carolina beating Tennessee. I just don't think a freshman quarterback goes on the road and gets that job done. Now, it's not the toughest team they'll have faced. They'll have played Texas. They'll have played Alabama the week before, as a matter of fact. I just don't see Tennessee getting the job done. Even if they beat Alabama, it would be kind of that opportunity where they come off and just have a hangover week. South Carolina is my pick to win that game. So a 6-1 start, bowl eligible already. That's already 2 games better than last year. You go on the road on Halloween to face Oklahoma. It's going to be loss number 2. Oklahoma was just so physical last year, and I really don't expect that physicality to go anywhere. David Stone was a big part of that last year in this game specifically. Kind of wrecked things over the middle on this defensive line. I don't see that being much different this year. I think this is going to be a game where Oklahoma is looking to prove something, especially with John Mateer back. They didn't like the fact that injuries kind of hampered their season. They're going to want to do a little something this year. I think Oklahoma wins this game in Norman. Let's move on to that game against Texas A&M. This has been a wacky series in the decade of 2020s, or in the 2020 decade. It just has. I mean, and especially in Columbia, it's been tough on Texas A&M. I remember, what did they have? 4 turnovers, I think, in the first half a couple years ago when these two teams played. It's just kind of been weird whenever A&M's gone over to Columbia. It happens again this year, and I don't see that being too much different. They've struggled at times. I wonder how this offense is going to look without Colin Klein at the helm and what they're going to be kind of trying to make their identity. I think South Carolina gets the win. I think their defense will be able to do just enough, and I think their offense will be able to play a pretty solid game. You go on the road to Fayetteville, face Arkansas. I think that's another win. I don't see them losing this game. Come back home and face Georgia. I think this is loss number 3. This is where things just get a little too tough. We talked about it with Oklahoma. We talked about it with Alabama. We'll talk about it here. The talent probably is just a little too much. This is the first home loss of the season. Just a tough scene for South Carolina to close it out in SEC play. You get a chance to right the ship. You go on the road against Clemson, and I think they'll beat Clemson on the road, finishing 9-3, 6-3 in conference play. I am that bought into the difference-making ability of Kendall Briles and Stan Drayton specifically with the run game. This is going to be a different-looking South Carolina team than we saw last year, and if you are expecting the Mike Shula offense 2.0, you are going to be highly disappointed, especially if you are a Clemson fan or a Carolina hater. It's just, that's not going to happen this year. 9-3 is lofty, and I think 9-3 is the ceiling for this team. I don't see them going 10-2. I honestly don't see them making the playoff. I think if you lose your 3 toughest games, even with a win over Tennessee and A&M, and depending upon how good Clemson is, I don't know that 9-3 is good enough in 2026. I think they're just going to be on the outside looking in. What I will say about this team is while 9-3 is the ceiling, the floor I think is 6-6. That's if things completely falter, if injuries start taking place. This team could really go downhill, and I think that's going to be the biggest difference maker. I think they still start 3-0, but you could lose to Kentucky. You might fall to Florida. Tennessee and A&M are certainly not gimmies, and also that Clemson game at the end of the year is never a gimme. I don't care how much I lack the confidence in that Clemson team. I don't think that they're going to be a bad team. This is probably the most volatile team so far in terms of capability to be explosive and have this 9-10 win season versus the chance to just not get off the schneid at all and be a 5-6 win team. It could go either way. And I feel like that's what is going to make them so fun to watch this year, is just kind of seeing how the process takes place and what that process yields on the field, especially when you get to September 26th. The first 3 games, it's going to be about making sure you execute properly, play solid on defense, and you probably come out of there with 3 solid wins. After that, it's all about whether or not you've been executing the first 3. And if you can execute and maintain it, there's room for South Carolina to be a really good team. There's also room for, again, mediocrity. With that said, 9-3 is where we're going to land. And I'm fairly confident that I'm going to stick to that. I might drop it to 8-4 at some point, but otherwise, that's pretty much where we are. So it's been a fun start to preview season so far, and this South Carolina video is probably the easiest one for me to make, just because it's the first team that I feel like I've really known better than anybody else so far. Feel really good about where we stand with South Carolina, whether it does end up being a drop down to 6-6 or whether it stays at 9-3 by the time we do the full conference predictions. This is a team that I can say with confidence will look much better in 2026 than they were last year. And it won't be hard. The bar's not very high, but they'll look much better. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. As always, I appreciate y'all tuning in. Been a great start to preview season. This is our biggest time for growth, and all I ask of you is that you like and subscribe. Liking the video helps these videos continue to get out to more and more eyes, and helps this channel continue to get to more and more eyes. Subscribing helps this channel continue to meet your eyes, and I appreciate y'all tuning in. I know that the eye candy or eye broccoli on screen is not particularly the best, but I appreciate y'all for tuning in, listening to me run my mouth about college football for a little while, and it's been a good time. You can check us out on Discord. We got a lot of good fun going on over there. We've got some good stuff getting set to get going, especially the College Football 27 news that's been dropping. Got a chance to play the beta over the weekend, and it was a good, dare I say, very, very exciting start to the 27 life cycle. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited to go finish my 26 dynasty. I do stream a little bit here and there. So you can check us out on Discord there. Check us out on socials as well. I'm going to get caught up on posting here and kind of get ourselves more consistent. It's a struggle. I am not good with social media. I don't really like to use it. I just got to get used to it. It's part of growing a channel. So with all that said, I thank y'all so much for tuning in. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys tomorrow with another episode of Armchair Analysis, another episode of preview season. And I kind of did this to myself. I closed it before taking a look at the next team. I'm pumped. Tomorrow, Virginia Tech. The James Franklin era begins. What will we be talking about, and where will we land on Virginia Tech in 2026? Very excited to get to that. So make sure you guys stick around for that one. And yeah, we'll see y'all tomorrow with another episode of Armchair Analysis.